It's crazy to say, but Weird Nintendo really is carrying the video game industry right now, and realistically, it has been for most of this industry's existence. For the uninitiated, Weird Nintendo is a term that has been floated in games media for as long as I can remember, and for the most part, your assumption of what games apply are probably spot on, assuming you're from a Western country, of course. In more direct terms, Weird Nintendo is a phrase people generally tend to use to cynically describe Nintendo games with a Japan-centric presentation and especially Japan-centric sense of humor. My theory is this phrase is a holdover from G4 era games media coverage.
It is time of gamer!
It's X-Play!
Morgan-san!
Adam-san!
X-Play!
Can you really blame us? Because who knows anything about Japanese history? There were some samurai, they periodically killed themselves, a rat learned judo, and they invented a religion that sanctifies small trees and fat guys wrestling. Then we nuked them. That's how they turned into a real country.
While things have certainly gotten better since then, the sentiment definitely hasn't completely died out in the gaming industry, although I'll say it's not steeped in xenophobia these days. The disdain for weird is more about gamers' vice grip on their comfort zones nowadays, and that's a lot easier to work with. Nintendo is no stranger to tricking people out of those after all. Take Pokémon Pokopia, for example. Mixing the Dragon Quest Builders formula with the Pokemon world and its rules has allowed for the added wrinkle of a playable character that's a Ditto who LARPs as their trainer and that affords the player the ability to transform into other Pokemon to use their abilities to traverse and/or mold the world around you to your liking. This quirky approach has a direct effect on the flow of the gameplay and the superficial charm of this game's world. You don't need to do the whole Minecraft song and dance of building a boat to cross an ocean. You can just find Lapras and have it to teach you to do it yourself. You don't need an entire creative mode. You can just turn into Magnemite and that will give you most of the abilities you'd want out of one. As for the social sim elements, Pokemon already has a level of investment into its world and characters that most other games in this genre have not. Befriending a Venusaur with a southern accent feels different from befriending a wolf with the same in Animal Crossing, and Pokopia utilizes that difference to great effect. This all culminates in what became Switch 2's first breakout game. Pokopia is a great example of Weird Nintendo. Obviously, this particular game wasn't developed by Nintendo proper, instead being a game co-developed by Omega Force and Game Freak that Nintendo published outside of Japan. But I'd argue Pokemon itself as a franchise wouldn't exist without Nintendo's support of this philosophy, and Pokopia is a byproduct of the relationship they built with Game Freak as a result of it. That said, the best part about Pokopia isn't even the fact that it's weird, but rather it's how it approaches making what is weird feel normal and making what is a normal, trite mechanic just a little weird to keep it interesting. Usually in an effort to make it better suited to the gameplay medium than previous attempts that overcomplicated a given mechanic. In fairness, I am part of the cohort that assumed this game wouldn't be for me because of how random and weird it felt. Having since played the game, it went from a project I assumed would be a gimmick that came and went, like Pokemon Conquest, to being the highest quality Pokemon game to ever exist. Not highest quality spin-off, highest quality Pokemon game to ever exist. I can't emphasize this enough. Pokemon Pokopia was a shock to the collective systems of everyone I know. I quite literally was marinating on a video concept discussing the idea that Switch 2's appeal is fundamentally different from its predecessor as a platform without a ubiquitous game release that every Switch 2 owner gravitated towards. Switch 2, on the other hand, had a series of games that people bought it for, and they all lived on their own respective islands. Pokemon Pokopia changed that take overnight. I went from having 20 to 30 people online at a time with no repeat games to 80% of those same people all playing Pokemon Pokopia until 4 o'clock in the morning on a daily basis. My entire timeline became elaborate builds of subway systems, themed homes for people's favorite and least favorite Pokemon, and unlike every other Pokemon release before it, this wasn't just confined to Pokemon fans. This was a game that people that couldn't give give a damn about the Pokemon franchise before it have fallen in love with. And funnily enough, it's a game that has turned people that would never play a cozy life sim into avid fans of this game in particular. That's a strong case study for the power of thinking outside the box when it comes to creating a new game. It doesn't take being entirely unprecedented. At the end of the day, Pokopia is just an iteration of the Dragon Quest Builders games, but it has the inclusion of the Pokemon IP, a world with characters and rules that tens, if not hundreds of millions of people are already in love with and intimately familiar with. Something that Dragon Quest Builders Foundation can't quite claim. Taking that established foundation of a game and mixing it with something we think is a known quantity is bound to yield unique results. This is a game that before it, no other major developer would dare to make. It's a game that even lifetime fans like myself were very skeptical at first glance, but yet and still it's the biggest breakout success story on the Nintendo Switch 2 platform to date. That's one aspect of the value of Weird Nintendo, and it's a perfect illustration of the starting point of this phenomenon. The second example is what games of this ilk look like once they have some level of proven success under their belt. Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, another cozy life sim, then somehow ramps up the weirdness with a similar yet even more personal foundation. People love social media, people love silly goofy videos, people love playing God, and this is essentially all of those things fused into one. You get to have a group of your close friends, family, celebrities you love or hate, fictional characters, original characters, and everything in between in a sandbox that thrusts them into wacky situations that are a joy to engage with and share with people in real life. I bought this game to put Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, and Drake on an island and see what would happen. That led to the idea to put my friends that I know would find interactions between these people funny. Those friends then inspired new ideas for new people that are connected to them or each other in various ways, and that all builds into a wacky reality TV show without the crippling sense of secondhand embarrassment. Just like Pokopia, this isn't a wholly new concept. The Sims has been doing a similar thing for years and years, but what sets Tomodachi Life Living the Dream apart is what I think is its primary value, and that's its function as a glimpse into Japanese culture's influence on the dev team that works on it out of Nintendo. While Nintendo isn't exactly a stranger to sprinkling in some Japanese cultural references into their games here and there, most of their major franchises have historically gone to great lengths to be global in their appeal, which really just means succumbing to the American hegemony. Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, on the other hand, while it certainly has some things Western society would be able to recognize and therefore identify with, has a sense of humor that is very Japanese. A lot of the items you engage with are even more Japanese, and hell, even its name is unapologetically Japanese. Unlike Pokopia, instead of turning a beloved franchise on its head using twists to an established formula, Tomodachi Life Living the Dream aims to use people you know and love to do the same using cultural touchstones you may not. Like I mentioned, Tomodachi Life is a known quantity to some degree. The original Tomodachi Life was a top 10 seller on Nintendo 3DS with 6.72 million units sold. Furthermore, Miitomo, may it rest in peace, was an early Nintendo mobile app experiment with a very similar style to Tomodachi Life that was downloaded over 10 million times. All of this is to say that while this game absolutely fits the weird descriptor with Nintendo, it was able to become a juggernaut of sorts. And beyond its unlikely commercial success, it's just a really smart idea packaged in an offbeat way. Since the Switch era, there's been a contingent of Nintendo fans that have been vocal about this perceived decline of Nintendo in regards to their charm. And while there's certainly a contingent of people that genuinely feel that, I was there. I know the people covering this alleged decline were just as, if not more loud, complaining about how weird Wii U was, how Nintendo needed to stop the gimmicks, or how Nintendo was fumbling by deprioritizing E3 and focusing their energy on Nintendo Directs. I watched people beg Nintendo to make more straightforward hardware. They begged for Nintendo to deprioritize innovation in their quirky ideas. And now these same people and others that may or may not independently actually feel the same are lamenting the realities of what they begged for back then. These people say whatever takes they think will garner passionate conversation, not because they believe them, but because they know these conversations equal engagement, and engagement equals views and ad revenue. And that grift is laughingly obvious because we do still get these charming projects. These people just downplay their value until their cynicism is disproven by their meteoric success after the fact. With the way these people have been complaining, you would think Nintendo Switch 2 is yet another mini PC wannabe like Microsoft, Sony, and now Valve are selling minor variations of. But in reality, even outside of the fun, quirky projects that these people are ignoring, Nintendo Switch 2 is Nintendo iterating on a form factor they pioneered, rather than harping on a long established standard like those other guys are doing. And to be all the way real, it's not even a straightforward iteration. Nintendo built in an entirely new control interface previously unseen on consoles, improved on their motion technology, and built in additional I/O that could be used for the future innovations that these people claim they want. The only difference here from a Wii U is that they also made it a point to have a reasonable level of linear improvement. They should aim to improve their tech specs. They should keep the overall form factor familiar. Even keeping the name straightforward was a reasonable decision for them to make. Importantly, none of this precludes Switch 2 from being a breeding ground for innovation in the games. All of that said, I firmly believe that Nintendo's propensity for making quirky games so deeply inspired by their culture is the main driver of growth in this industry overall from all angles. And even in this generation, the generation Nintendo has paid the most attention to tech specs in over 2 decades, the key to their current dominance has been their unique approach to theming and game design. Games in this realm are frequently described as random, but I contend the ones that stick to our bones are actually very intentional and calculated, just in a less formulaic way than a game that neatly fits into a genre, or even could be directly remapped onto another game. These weird games follow their own sets of rules. They adhere to culture, they deconstruct tropes, they redefine standards. And while they all tend to have, if not all, most of these things in common, the way they remain unique and don't feel like they follow any set of rules is by adhering to those rules pretty loosely. Different games follow certain rules more closely than others, and that throws people off the scent. But if you pay close enough attention, it's easy to see the structure in the weird games that stick, a lot of which are poster children now for genres they've created. To circle back to the X-Play callback at the start of the video, I think a lot of the resistance to weird spawns from people's resistance to unfamiliar cultures. This, I think, is somewhat understandable. To some degree, it is human nature to be weary of things you don't understand. However, I think allowing this instinct to win is a universal net negative. There's so many things that people now accept as normal that at one point in time were weird. And I contend that we should collectively be more receptive to the weird, because I'm gonna be real, everything being and remaining normal is just everything becoming bland and uninteresting. I get gamers love their comfort food. Shout out Star Fox 64 #4, which in fairness, even that is pretty weird by industry standards given the art style and the VTuber game chat feature. The point is to say, I understand comfort food exists for a reason, and I don't think that reason is without merit, but for the most part, at one point in time, especially in this industry, even that that comfort was weird. You were just young enough to not have the shackles of nostalgia scare you away from trying new things and checking it out. Mario was weird until it became the face of video games. Pokemon was weird before it became the literal biggest media franchise in the world. And there's a lot of weird in between that makes this medium what it is today. Most of what's good started as weird. It's just hard for most people to see that fact because we're increasingly inundated with nostalgia bait that people have been trained to be weary of anything that doesn't scratch that itch. Speaking of nostalgia, click the video on your screen to hear how Switch 2 is history repeating itself in ways no one will see until it's too late. Thank you to paid members over at shop.watchredirect.com like Trev L. Steinberg for making this video possible. Hit the link in the description to join in the credits of every video and in receiving physical and digital perks.